wasn't all that weird. He may or may not have run around naked till he was 6, and because that's what kids did back then. But here's where the next big influence came into Theo's life. Without consulting Theo, without consulting any of the children, the whole group, the whole commune, up and moved right around the time he turned 8 to one of the top 10 most violent cities in the United States. And they didn't just move to one of the top 10 most violent cities in the United States. They moved to the center, and I mean the physical center of the most violent ghetto in that city. Okay? I want to paint a picture for you here. And please understand that I'm going to talk about a Mexican ghetto, but for the love of God, don't think that this in any way reflects some sort of silly racist sentiment or anything like that, because that's not what we're doing here. This Mexican ghetto was all dilapidated paint, right? It was all overgrown grass with cars with no tires on the wheels parked on lawns. It was unchained pit bulls. It was dark-skinned, dangerous men with dark glasses and quick laughing eyes, right? The kind that you couldn't trust because they were looking for a way to hurt you. It was oppression. It was dirty streets. It was flannel. I'm not taking anything away from flannel. It was gun handles sticking out of pants, right? Now, I want to paint a picture for you of a caravan of buses and Chinook campers, if anybody remembers those, the predecessors to the modern RV. And Volkswagen buses, of course, naturally, all painted up with slogans on them, literally in old school circus lettering, right? Saying things like, get rid of money, worldwide work stoppage, UFO ETI, cosmic intelligence, we can all change the world. Flying saucers painted everywhere, right? Little pictures of angels and things. Now I want you to imagine that, driving bumper to bumper into what at that time, and still to this day, you can Google this now, is one of the most unsafe places in the United States. If I say that Theo stood out, I am passing up an opportunity to say the phrase turd in a punch bowl. Okay? From the minute they arrived, Theo had a memory of looking out the back of the Chinook camper that said, get rid of money now on one side and worldwide work stoppage on the other. Here's a tip. Here's a pro tip. Don't go into a ghetto and talk about worldwide work stoppage. Don't do it. He remembered the sun was going down because they were traveling east. He saw the sunset, and as he pulled in, he saw boys on bikes riding up behind him. Lowrider cars, literally pulling up like, what the fuck are we seeing here, right? I mean, it was something they had never seen before. And he made eye contact with one guy sitting on a stoop, and that guy stood up like this. And when he did, he could see a gun handle sticking out of his pants. It was less than 6 hours after getting there that he got in his first fist fight. Every day for the 4 years he lived there, if he fought one time, and I'm talking fought, I want to differentiate between kids tussling over toys and the kind of fight that is 3 people corner you in an alley, and if you don't get out, you get kicked to a pulp. You get stomped to a puddle. That's the kind of fighting he had to do. Like that. From peace and love to that. He barely had time to ask the question, why the hell aren't the grown-ups protecting me? Why is no one protecting me? I'm a little skinny kid who was taught peace and love. Why is no one protecting me? Barely had time to ask that question. What he would learn years later is that he spent 4 years in full-on fight or flight mode. Imagine that. How many of you guys know what it feels like to be in fight or flight mode, where the adrenaline curtain just dumps down, right? Most of us, not to take anything away from the people in this room, but most of us freeze. Some of us act. Thank God he acted. And he would also learn many years later that that was probably something he inherited from his father's side. He didn't know his father, by the way. So he got really good with his hands, right? He got fast hands, as we used to call it back in the old days. And unlike other kids, he never got a taste for fighting, right? He got good at it. But it was because he got to a point where he understood that if I go from this to that and throw myself at you and bite you and stick my fingers in your eyes, I might be able to walk away. That was the level of violence that he was exposed to for 4 years. So, 8 years of you don't fit in out there, you won't fit in out there, you can't fit in out there, and by the way, we don't want to fit in out there, right? And then 4 years of what's 365 days in a year, right? So 3, 6, 9, 12. It almost sounds surreal to say he had probably 1,400 violent altercations in a 4-year period. He used to walk around at 10 years old with an iron rod in his sleeve and an iron rod in his other sleeve. And by this time, he had had 2 years in this environment, right? And so he's starting to harden. Little Theo, little beautiful, innocent Theo, who like every other child was full of promise, is now walking the streets unattended at 10 years old. Nobody looking after him except some people that he started to call his brothers, who were born in the commune, the cult as well. He remembers thinking to himself, I may be 10, I may be skinny, but I'm a bad motherfucker. Right? Anybody want to take a guess at what kind of life this trajectory would set for him? No? I'll do it for you. Oh, yes.
Violence
You there.
Crime.
There was a bit of that, yes.
Drugs.
Drugs. Anyone else? We're starting to get somewhere. Prison? Yes. Anyone else? In Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, they call it jails, institutions, and death. That's what they call it, right? They don't talk about the 2 to 3% who have a turning point moment. And what Theo would come to learn, and he didn't know this during all of this, he would come to learn that his father's side of the family was outlaws, killers, literally killers, criminals, hard men. In fact, his grandfather, Carl, his motto in life, and this is kind of funny because it's like one of those, you can't write this shit, you know. His grandfather's motto in life was, if you fuck with Carl Wolf, you've got a problem. This was his North Star. This was how he got through life. And Theo didn't know any of this in these first 12 years of his life. He had only seen his dad 2 times. And when his dad would show up, he was like a rock star. Well, literally, he was a jazz star. But he was this man who was more myth than man, right? Anybody know someone like that? Somebody who, it's almost like their reputation precedes them, yeah? That was his father. And one of the things that, this is a bit of an aside for Theo, but one of the things that he started to piece together was he was being judged for what his father had done. Right? Nobody could possibly say you're an 8-year-old kid, you're a bad human. Right? That doesn't make any sense. So before I get too far afield, though, I want to go back to the kind of life he had when at 12 years old, finally, inexplicably, the cult that he was born into somehow let his blood family move to a safer part of this town. Really no explanation as to why. Maybe somebody wised up and saw that these kids were in real danger. I'll give you an example of the danger. They were the house they lived in was a historic monument in the middle of a ghetto. I want you guys to take a second to soak that in. So here's a ghetto, right? And I described it for you. There's one house in the middle of this ghetto that is 3 stories tall. It's immaculately preserved. It's a mansion. Who would like to live there if everybody else in that ghetto was poor and pissed? Right, naturally. naturally. So, stranger than fiction, Theo and the other siblings, I say siblings of his, that were being raised in this group were allowed to just walk out the gates unattended, without telling anyone where they went, right? And they'd have to go to school, of course. And so what they started to do, after having lots of altercations on the way to school, including one where they had to jump into bushes to avoid being driven down by a car. Like Impala, candy apple red spokes, you know what I mean? Up on the curb. And Theo himself, during that moment, he jumped so hard he hit the wrought iron fence and he split his head right here. But that's not the story. This is the story. They began to get smart, and they cobbled together a collection of weapons, sticks, chains. One of them even had a hammer, which it turns out is pretty ineffectual in a brawl. Just put that out there. But they would do this every day as a routine. They would hide the weapons in the bushes right outside the gate of the house. And they would leave for school, they would quickly grab their weapons, and they would form up. And one person every day had to take rear flank. On this day, it was Theo's turn to take rear flank. It was a pack of about 6 kids, and they've all got weapons. None of them are older than 12. Theo's like 10 years old, and he's got this stick right in his, right? Because he's scared shitless. And that's how he lived that 4 years of his life, scared shitless. 2 boys from the neighborhood, in what defines audacity, come right up clearly in view of Theo, and they've got baseball bats. And they have the nerve to look him in the eye and go, as they tiptoe up in the caricature of trying to be quiet. Well, Theo was scared, but he wasn't stupid. He sounds the alarm. One of the older boys, Ian, who was big for his age even then, and had a massive chain, turned with the reflexes of a cobra. And just without thinking, he lets the chain unfurl. The chain hits a boy, Ray, smack on the side of the head and down into the neck, and Ray drops like a sack of potatoes, sitting there on the ground quivering, literally like this. This is how desensitized they were at this point. Do you know what they did? The other boy ran off, and the whole group just formed back up and walked to the bus stop, leaving this boy bleeding out of his ear and quivering on the ground. I tell you this so that you understand the kind of imprinting that Theo was set out into the world with. When he was 12, they moved, as I said, and when he was 14, now think back to the story about money. This is important. When he was 14, his mother says to him, without any preamble, without any explanation, you have to go get a job.